Hello everyone, it's Leon here, and I am with Dan, who is Special Ops. What are you now?
Working on special projects, but I'm a long-time Metal Gear Solid fan.
Yeah.
I've written an awful lot for CVG News.
So you are the best man to speak to about this trailer. Now we're seeing Kaz Miller and I'm guessing Big Boss, and possibly a third person.
Yeah, my theory on this is that whilst they're looking at a third party, I don't actually think that third person exists. I think the third person is what we later see as the bandaged man who introduces himself as Ishmael.
Yeah. I'm just going to go back and have a quick look, because we saw... So we obviously got Fox, and that suit that we saw, is that the Peace Walker suit?
Yeah.
And this is supposed to be taking place kind of in between Peace Walker and really where the main games in the series start, isn't it? Like so the MG on MSX.
Yeah, I mean, what we're thinking we're seeing is if Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes is set pretty much immediately after Peace Walker, we're presuming that this section, which is kind of the Phantom Pain section, is after the events of Ground Zeroes. Yeah. So again, joining the dots, you'd think from what we see later in the trailer of the mother base being blown up and, you know, Big Boss fighting desperately to defend it. He's now suffered those injuries as a result of that battle. But the big question mark to raise is the ordering of the trailer isn't strictly chronological, no. And there are devices that are possibly used to mislead you. As a result, you've got to be a bit careful when you draw inferences.
I mean, there's a lot, isn't there, in the trailer that kind of implies how much might be real or not. Like you say, this third person, so it zooms out to this third viewpoint here, and you think that this third person that we're watching this through may not be a real person.
I don't think there's an actual physical person there. I think, but you've got to look at the way the trailer plays out and what's said. Essentially, it's like almost like a camera perspective, which may or may not be a pair of eyes.
Yeah.
And at the point where the doctors say the patient has entered a coma, that's when Miller becomes active and says, what about the other guy? Almost as if the other guy was born at that moment. Now, yeah. I think, my theory is that the bandage guy is a fracturing of Big Boss's psyche used to protect himself from a sort of traumatic event. And when you'll notice later in the trailer that when you're first introduced to, not in the trailer, sorry, in the gameplay footage they showed at GDC, when they're first introduced to the bandage man, and he says, how long have you been looking after me? He says, about 9 years. Yeah. As in implying he's only existed since the trauma event happened.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things it's interesting with Ishmael, this bandage guy, is that the first thing he says is, call me Ishmael, which is the first line from Moby Dick.
Yes.
And you've got this sort of idea that you've got this whale in the game that's another Moby Dick sort of reference. You've got the fact that Snake has lost an arm, like Captain Ahab, he's lost a limb. And a lot of people wonder if there is some kind of metaphor for him becoming obsessed with something and it becomes his ruin.
Yeah, I think that's sort of obviously the references in if Big Boss was to develop an obsession, ultimately in the Metal Gear canon we know that Big Boss becomes sort of what's considered the villain, and he is in the MSX Metal Gear games. He's the villain who Solid Snake has to bring down.
Yeah.
Now, and he's considered as a bad guy, and you know his base out of heaven is like the baddie's base, and you've got to think, well, what drives him down the path that he would be considered, you know, not the good guy.
Yeah.
And it could be this. I think possibly it's this event, this sort of fracturing of a psyche event that drives him down a really dark path, and it's similar to the narrative of Moby Dick, where you know Captain Ahab becomes obsessed with the whale and drives his crew out to sea, and then they have this thing almost of they see a spout every night, and he keeps claiming that he's seeing a clue from the whale, but in fact it's like a psychic spout. It doesn't really exist.
Yeah. And
he's so obsessed with chasing a thing that almost isn't there, he's just, you know, driving them out willfully to ruin.
Yeah, I mean, and the first time we see Snake here in this bit, he looks like he's just seen something horrifically traumatic. Something is obviously troubling him, and we'll see. I'm not sure if it's coming up next or in a moment. We'll see he flies over what looks like Mother Base, which has now been sort of ruined and destroyed, possibly because of this guy who will pop up in a minute, who's a bit of a mystery. Actually, that was in there, wasn't it? So we've seen this character before. He's the Zoff guy, and people talking possibly he could be like part of Cypher, so what becomes the Patriots. So yeah, this guy here, we still don't know much about him. There's a lot of people saying he might be the Bandage Man, but the Bandage Man doesn't actually look that damaged under his bandages.
I don't think that's the bandage man.
No.
Certainly not in the chronology we've seen. If you were to put the bandages on top of that guy, which I did once in a mad article, the corner of his mouths are just too cut and incorrect. Where the bandage man actually has got a pretty decent looking face underneath the regions we can see.
And he's linked again to this sort of this duality. So there's that Fox and Zoff, and when they first announced Ground Zeroes, it's, was it from Fox 2 Phantoms Were Born?
Yes.
And there's this whole idea, there's this duality thing going on. He, we'll see later on, has, so that's Mother Base. He, we'll see in a minute, has these Zoff patches, and he throws them out when he's flying over what looks like Camp Omega. So he seems to be this kind of the evil opposite, almost, of Snake, who we see here, like looking down over the ruined Mother Base, which he spent ages building in Peace Walker. And there we see the obviously the Zoff stuff being removed. I mean, is there any kind of history to sort of this reversing at all? It's a new thing.
The Fox and Zoff thing, I haven't really got to the bottom of it. I think there's definitely something about the idea of 2 Phantoms Were Born, the idea of a duality, there being twin psyches, and sort of almost a split of personality. And again, Fox and Zoff literally mirror images. Now, it's almost like, is there a mirror image of Big Boss that he's created in order to protect himself whilst he's in a coma?
Yeah.
And I think Fox and Zoff are sort of hints at that. I've got I can't even describe it next, it's too insane. I've got a crazier theory about who the burnt man is.
Right.
And it would be that the burnt man is Big Boss.
Well, he was, because he was burnt, wasn't he?
Yeah, because Big Boss, he enters 2 comas in the Metal Gear canon. One is in 1972, which triggers the events of Les Enfants Terribles, which is where Big Boss's DNA is cloned and it leads to the birth of Solid and Liquid Snake and later Solidus. Now that leads to a philosophical split between him and Major Zero. Major Zero then goes off to reclaim the Patriots as something else, as a more sort of AI information controlling unit, working with SIGINT, where Big Boss spins off, creates MSF, and obviously the events we're seeing now. And broadly and philosophically, you're talking about 2 worldviews. One worldview being the Patriots, about information, about control, and about that being a way to control the world, where I suppose in a spiritual or philosophical context, somewhere like Big Boss is more like a Rousseau. He's a sort of state of nature type of man, and he believes in like freedom of will and spirit. And Outer Haven and Mother Base were like a sort of soldier's refuge or heaven, and they believe in like soldiers being free in their own spirits, versus the Patriots, who are about controlling society, SOP, all those things we've seen in later Metal Gear games. I know this is quite mad and insane.
Well, no, because I mean the series has set up like quite a strong precedent, with obviously like Revolver Ocelot becoming like Liquid Ocelot and all that kind of. After 2 games, they suddenly went, actually, this is how he did it, and he hypnotised himself, and he wasn't possessed, and
it's mad.
Yeah, so I mean, this thing, anything could happen. They've set up such a sort of a crazy world that anything's possible. Now, this looks like Mother Base being destroyed. You can see Miller being helped by, we assume, Big Boss, and again, we keep seeing this burnt man. So it looks like he's responsible for the destruction of Mother Base. And is this heaven or is this? Military?
Sorry, we're seeing here what looks like the destruction of Mother Base.
But I forget now. Is that Military Sans Frontières?
Yes, it's the MSF, Militaire Sans Frontières, which is the unit Big Boss sets up in 1970. Well, just after 1972, it was like 74 in the events of Peace Walker, where you spend all the game whipping men up to your magical base in Fulton balloons and various things like that.
And building it, so you're sort of personally invested in this base if you played Peace Walker.
Yeah.
And again, so we see the Scary Man, we see Zoff patches, it's clear that they are responsible for what is happening. And it looks like they're playing up the emotion quite a lot. Like Snake looked traumatised earlier, we see him looking quite upset that guy gets shot. So this looks like it's a personal thing for him rather than his normal kind of gruff voice, I'll just get in there and do the job. Now, we saw this before when the Phantom Pain was just a Phantom Pain. The drugs looked symbolic there, as does the hospital treatment. So again, they're playing into this sort of idea that we might not be seeing what's really real. We've got the flower petals here that everyone references as from being the Big Boss fight, like elements of his memory sort of intruding into what he's seeing or perceived to be seeing. Do we think this is Dr. Marv, the guy from the original?
Do you know what? I did some research on it, and I can't even remember what I thought because I didn't really think it was that important.
Well, he looks exactly like one of the characters called Dr. Marv something or other.
Dr. Keo Marv.
That's it, yeah. And he was the guy in Metal Gear 2, I think, that created the oil-generating bacteria that kind of drove that particular plot line. But the bald head, the round glasses, the little moustache, it's quite a strong likeness. But like you say, how relevant that would be. So this is going to be the tutorial. We've been told that the Phantom Pain will be the sort of the opening. It's a tutorial moment, but not necessarily opening.
Yeah, well, the idea is that the Ground Zeroes is like a prologue to what the core of Metal Gear Solid 5 is, and within that, the Phantom Pain is like the opening tutorial of Metal Gear Solid 5.
Yeah.
So in a way, they're almost both like prologues in a way, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Now, this is probably more where the true seeds of Metal Gear Solid 5 are seen.
Yeah.
And they showed this demo being played at GDC in a sort of 6-minute playthrough where he were getting snatches.
Yeah.
What we saw live was, I guess, how it's actually going to play. The character introduced himself, and his first lines, is, "Call me Ishmael." It's exactly the same as the first line of Moby Dick.
Yeah.
Moby Dick is delivered to you through the "Call me Ishmael," who's sort of the invisible narrator in Moby Dick, who sort of slowly fades into the background as if he's not really part of the book.
Yeah.
And I think that the obvious reference is this is a similar thing, as in there's this guy who's got a physical manifestation, but he's really like he's like the narrator of the tale, or he represents a section of Big Boss's psyche.
Yeah. Now, we've seen that there's a lot of fire sort of imagery in here. Now, this character is interesting because he's got the kind of the Portable Ops armour. You can just sort of see on his legs. Let's get back there, yeah. So, seems to be wearing Portable Ops gear, possibly Big Boss. You can sort of see towards on his head, it looks like he's got these sort of horns. And later on, we'll see another character that's got horns. And at the end of the trailer, we'll also see Snake has one lone horn popping out the top of his head. Some people have been arguing about it being shrapnel or whatever, but it clearly, from an imagery point of view, it's horn.
Yeah.
There's no sort of precedent for that in the games at all. So, do we have any idea what that could be, or is it just we're going to have to wait and see?
I think all we know broadly is that Kojima was working on a project called Project Ogre for a long time, and he kept getting angry that people kept saying, "What's Project Ogre?" And he'd said, "Well, you haven't." And this was after Ground Zeroes. He said, "You haven't seen Project Ogre yet. Project Ogre is the project in which Demon appears," and it was sort of in that clipped English, but essentially saying it's the game with the demon or the spirit of a demon.
Soul of a demon.
Yeah, soul of a demon. And I think like what we're seeing here is almost physically he's a demonic looking character with horns. Now, again, in the naming of the Phantom Pain trailer, when they created the fake Moby Dick studio, it was being run by Joaquin Mogren. Now, the middle words of like Mogren are ogre. So whether that was a telltale clue that this is in fact Project Ogre. And again, as I say, it relates out to the tale of, let's say Big Boss suffers a severe trauma, enters a coma, he's very upset about something, splits his psyche two ways. One side of him is kind of the good Big Boss, the soldier, the fighter. The other side is the one who's twisted by vengeance or has got some kind of, Captain Ahab style drive to achieve a certain task.
Yeah.
I think then you've got a clearer identity between, the ogre side of Big Boss maybe and the traditional soldier good side of Big Boss. It could be that what we're seeing here is almost a manifestation of how Boss sees himself, or the fact that it's almost literally clear, because there's a scene in a minute. Play it and I'll talk about it when it comes.
See, I've never noticed there's a man outside the car going past there. So,
yeah, I think we see that character in a minute when he climbs out.
Well, this is the car rolling over, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then if you look, go back around there. So look, so as they're rolling over, look, there's that guy, the helmet in the top right. There's a man going past.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder what's going on there. And again, the drug sort of imagery being thrust right in the camera, suggesting again that maybe not completely real. Was this what you're going to talk about? Was it?
No, it's actually after this. In fact, do you know what? We're not going to see it because it's only in the gameplay trailer. I'm really sorry. So.
Oh, that's all right. But again, we've got another look at this guy. You can just about make out some horns on his head as he raises it. This is new stuff we haven't seen before. We've seen the crash. We've not seen him get out.
Yeah, no, get out. Where's the bandage man gone?
Yeah, good point.
Is he invisible? Is he gone? It's significant who meets him.
And then we see this guy. Now, this is causing a lot of confusion because everyone's going, "Oh, it's got to be Psycho Mantis," as a young child. But looking at some of the timings of it, we know this is set in, I think, post-coma is 1983, but we know that Psycho Mantis was still with the KGB up until 91, at which point he apparently joined the FBI. But we know that also Kojima is pretty fast and loose with pretty much the entire canon. But it's an interesting choice of imagery, especially as later on, actually we'll see it here, he raises his arm to point, and he's got the dangly straitjacket kind of arms, and you'll see him later on ascend and float through the ceiling, which also implies that he may not be real himself. Was it you that earlier were saying about he's projecting himself into the snake's head?
You've almost got to raise the idea of, again, the notion of what's real, what isn't real. Has, is Big Boss actually escaping with the physical bandage man, and is he even actually physically escaping a hospital, or mentally trying to escape from within the coma?
Yeah.
That is where it gets very meta and very complex. Now, has Psycho Mantis been sent into his coma? You'd think because it's Psycho Mantis, he's been sent into his coma to hurt Snake or damage him. But then the reverse could be true, as in who could reach someone in a coma, possibly a psychic like Psycho Mantis.
Yeah.
It could even be he's trying to retrieve the good Snake from the tormented coma battles with him.
And we know as well that I've looked up a lot of stuff. My knowledge is nowhere near as strong as yours. We know that he didn't wear the gas mask until about the year 2000, which is after he spent some time in a serial killer's mind for whatever reason, and that was the start of what drove him a little bit weird. So if that's prior to 2000, it doesn't explain why he's wearing the gas mask earlier. It does explain why he could be good, like a nice sort of character as opposed to the evil sort of character we meet in the original Metal Gear. Now, this character, do we any idea who he is? People have been talking about Frank Yeager and different characters like that. There's some talk about the flash of red we see. I think we get a better shot of him in a moment after the flaming death whale. Here we go.
Yeah, to be quite honest, the outfit is very similar. It's like an 80s version of an outfit Ocelot might wear.
Yeah.
The big flared collars, you see his boots, the hair's not that dissimilar. There's quibbles about, is he the right age? Again, because we're dealing with a slightly fast and loose timeline, we can't tell. What we do know is in the Metal Gear chronology that at some stage, Ocelot, working with Eva, does rescue Big Boss from a coma situation and sort of rebuild his body. Now, that whether that's this coma or whatever in the timeline, we don't know, but there's things that would suggest to me that Ocelot makes a lot of sense. More than that, spoiler alert for anyone who's not finished Metal Gear Solid 3, Ocelot is the son of Boss, who's kind of the hero double agent of Metal Gear Solid 3. Boss is synonymous with a horse, and here turns up the son of Boss riding a horse.
Yeah.
Who's Ocelot.
And the things with Metal Gear as well is you could argue that everything is symbolic, like the colour red or whatever, but also it could just be symbolic at that moment in time when Kojima decides it is, and then a game later, it's not. Like, I don't think he had any great plan, or what we're trying to unpick here, like a nest of needles and string, was never intentional. It's just him making it up as he sort of goes along. Of course. So the Flaming Death Whale, which...
Flaming Death Whale, if you're looking for supporting evidence of the fact that Big Boss is in a coma, if you think about the role of the chopper within Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes is your means of escape from an open world environment. It's your ferrying vehicle. Now, if you were somebody trapped within his own subconscious, and we've all had dreams like this, imagine that within your subconscious you think you're getting away and a chopper's coming to rescue you, but a flaming death whale removes your one chance of escape.
Yeah.
It's redolent, I think, of someone wrestling with himself, and his own subconscious is stopping him escaping from the coma.
Yeah, like I say, the helicopter's been talked about widely as how you get around in Ground Zeroes, and here he's being prevented. And interestingly here, like, he looks like he's almost being shaken awake. So you sort of see that whale grab the helicopter, and then that looks like he's just been woken up by Miller. And more flaming imagery here. We got these sort of the horse, which we've only seen up until this trailer was this image of this sort of flaming unicorn. But then we go on to see is actually in the game later on.
Was there two of them on that horse?
So look.
Yeah, there is.
It's hard to.
You'll see two heads now, I think. The one's like a flame projection.
I think it's just it's just flames coming off.
Keep going.
Oh yeah, actually.
You keep going. I think it's a bit further on.
Yeah, just a minute.
You'll see now when it splits.
Yeah, it's when what looks like the head goes down. You realise there's one hidden behind. So just coming up behind the horse's head, there's a second head that just comes up. Looks small. There, look at the legs. That's not the legs of the person riding
Yeah,
it.
play it out. Let's have a look.
Could that be Psycho Mantis? It's got the right hair for him.
Yeah, I don't know. I think basically, what we see in a minute is a scene where, literally this.
Yeah, well,
you see the two of them.
So this is this mystery man rescuing Snake.
And again, who are they being chased by here? Another flaming horse with a unicorn horn. There's one dude on that one, to be fair. Or is it one dude?
No, that is one dude. But it definitely looks like on that earlier horse, there's a smaller person in front of the rider, and the hair looked like Psycho Mantis.
Yeah, I don't want to get hung up on this, but I just think that, again, it's weird that he sees a flaming horse and suddenly he's shooting a flaming horse with a shotgun in an attempt to escape.
Yeah.
I think it's the forces that are trying. There's a really good capture.
Yeah, look, and that is the guy we saw from the hospital. That's the flaming mask man wearing the portable ops armour.
Well, again, there we go. We've got the absolute symbolism right here. We've got Bad Snake, Devil, Horn Snake doused in flames.
Yeah.
Fighting, right, Big Boss and Big Boss. As in, I say, it's the good Big Boss, the soldier Big Boss psyche versus the bad Big Boss psyche. They're literally fighting each other. Big Boss is fighting himself, the two sides of his personality, trying to escape.
And if this is if that's like kind of portable ops Big Boss, and his past is literally trying to catch up with him.
Yeah, exactly that. There we go. That's the biggest metaphor you're ever going to get. You're passed on a horse. It's chasing you. Yeah.
And then this looks like it's suddenly that interesting. No fire. There's no reflection of fire here, which kind of would imply that either they're in a later scene and they've gotten away from where the flames were, or, as you say, none of it's real.
Yeah.
Just a nice bit of text showing off the face. Now this is when we sort of see what we assume is Snake waking up, because the nurse is sort of surprised to see him conscious, and there's a bit where she's sort of mouthing words to him where it clearly looks like she doesn't realise he's there, like awake. This British flag is interesting because Britain hasn't really featured a lot in the series. And is this like English hospital, or
the thinking is that's you've got to look at it. Is it a British?
There's a map there, isn't there?
Is it a British colony? The map is of a location in Cyprus, which people had pegged to a military hospital in Cyprus, which was a place where they used to house ex-SAS war people. So it's possible, it's possibly Cyprus. Some people have pinned the accent of the bearded guy believed to be Dr. Keogh Marv as Cypriot. Dr. Keogh Marv isn't Cypriot, so that's a little bit weird. But, hey, maybe he's not Dr. Keogh Marv, he's just a Cypriot man in Cyprus, imagine that theory.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I wanted to point out. So we're getting towards the end of the trailer. There's a point where it's been in previous trailers where they go V as awake, which obviously a lot of people have referenced to being sort of 5, obviously, Roman numerals. Kojima's never used Roman numerals before, but there was also a reference to portable ops where Big Boss is referred to as Vic Boss, and there's a line where they kind of go, the boss will lead us to victory, which possibly links up. There's also some interesting stuff on the lyrics. So the song is a garbage song called Not Your Kind of People, 5th track on their 5th album. And the lyrics for it are: you dropped by as I was sleeping, you came by to see the whole commotion, and when I woke I started laughing, the joke's on me for not believing. Which sort of, could mean anything, but it's interesting that it is about sleeping and waking up and something sort of happening during that state.
Well, from Fox, 2 phantoms were born.
Yeah.
2 psyches, 2 splits. Maybe I'm talking myself into this crazy old theory, but, I don't know. I think
could the whole game almost be played in his head, where it's like you could almost decide whether he becomes a good guy or a bad guy at the end?
I think that's perfectly sensible. I think essentially you've got to look at it as, Kojima is broadly trying to explore a certain section of his already written back catalogue, and there's like a 30 year chunk which hasn't really been explored, maybe a 20-year chunk.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to create a long traditional narrative game that moves across a 20-year sweep. But if you use a device, a time-skipping device, like an Animus in Assassin's Creed, or let's say a Coma,
Yeah.
you've got a perfect device to cut between years or locations or chronology, and it doesn't matter because it's a man's psyche. You can do what you want with it.
Yeah, and this is interesting. The little closing shot, we can clearly see the robot arm, which is the same arm as Galvez from Peace Walker. And then we've also got this horn, which you can see quite clearly up there, which we just don't know what that means. There's Diamond Dogs, which we know now potentially is a group he formed before Military Sans Frontiers, which has now just been conjured out of existence.
It's probably after MSF, I'm guessing. I think this is like after Big Boss's rebirth post-Coma.
Yeah.
This is like his new life, his new psyche, or whatever he decides to do. He's the new unified psyche. He's a physical being here, I think.
Yeah.
And Diamond Dogs would be his new unit post-MSF, and this is like his new life. And again, I've done loads of research. You can read it all on CVG. There's lots to tie Diamond Dogs with Africa and the Angola/Mozambique region. And if you go further into Africa, it's eventually where Outer Heaven is formed, which is Big Boss's ultimate soldier's haven, and the ultimate manifestation of his world belief versus the controlling belief of the Patriots. And that's where ultimately Solid Snake ends up infiltrating and taking down his father.
Yeah. And I think that is it. V has come too. I think it's fascinating that we got a trailer with so many kind of references and so many kind of potential clues, and we don't know any of it means, and it could all mean nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I could be absolutely completely misreading it. It's just that, again, I don't know. I've spent 18 months of my life studying this, so I've got a feeling it's on the right track. But hey, you got to keep an open mind. We'll see. A little plug. I'll be writing about it more on CVG. Hopefully today, maybe over the next couple of days, with a really expanded theory about what everything we've seen so far means for the real Metal Gear 5 story, because I believe this final scene is where Metal Gear Solid 5 truly begins.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, well, there'll be a link for that in the comments. If you've got anything to say, make a comment and we'll get back to you. Thank you very much for your time, Dan.
No, thank you, Leon.
Cool. Goodbye.